Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Let's get started by taking a look at today's highlights. With President Park Geun-hye ready to embark on her first visit to Iran on Sunday, we take a look at economic relations and what opportunities await Korean businesses. With China's Labor Day holiday coming up and Japan's Golden Week starting today, Korea's tourism sector is getting ready to give a warm welcome to foreign tourists. But first, could the Korean economy finally be finding its feet after sitting in the doldrums for months? New data show that the country's overall industrial output rose for the second straight month in March. But a closer look at the numbers suggests it's too early to tell. Our Hwang Jae reports.
Korea's industrial output picked up pace in March, rising 0.6% from the previous month. This is after figures dropped in January only to rebound the following month. In terms of last month's output, despite a production drop in the mining and manufacturing sectors, output across all industries rose thanks to robust activity in the construction and service sectors. But it's not all good news, as the rise in construction was mainly driven by state-run projects that swelled investment in social overhead capital as the government front-loaded its budget in the first quarter. When looking at production figures in the first 3 months of this year, the industrial output remained unchanged from the previous quarter, while output in the service sector actually dropped. Retail sales that rose over 4% in March from a month earlier also slid in the first quarter, deepening concerns from early this year that Korea might see a drastic drop in spending.
Late last year, domestic demand was doing better than exports, and that was due to the consumption tax cut on products like automobiles. Although the tax discount was extended in the first quarter, people have already bought whatever durable goods they need, so now we're facing the reality of consumption falling off a cliff.
There is a silver lining ahead, though, as the business sentiment index for this month came in at 71, up from 68 tallied a month earlier, according to the Bank of Korea. Although this signals confidence is on the rise among manufacturers, prospects are not quite bright enough as the figure remains well under 100, showing that pessimism still prevails. Hwang Jae, Business Daily.
This weekend, President Park Geun-hye embarks on a 3-day state visit to Iran. It's a historic visit, and not just because it'll be the first since global sanctions were lifted from Iran. And we connect to our Eunice Kim, who will take a closer look for us. So Eunice, President Park Geun-hye will be the first sitting Korean president to visit Iran since diplomatic relations were established in 1962. Now, I find that's quite remarkable.
Hi, Ji-yoon. Yeah, that's right. And pre-sanctions, Korea and Iran had served as top mutual trade partners in their respective regions. And for President Park Geun-hye, this journey could take a noted significance since it is a trip her father, the late President Park Geun-hye, who had established those diplomatic ties, never took. The journey begins on Sunday. President Park is set to meet her Iranian counterpart, President Hassan Rouhani, on Monday. That's local time, as the two reinforce bilateral ties that had been stalled due to the UN sanctions that Korea joined in earnest in 2010. Now, business will be the focus of this trip. The president travels with more than 200 business leaders, significantly more than the delegation of 166 in her mission to the U.S. back in October, which was a record figure then. Among them will be executives from a spread of industries, from, of course, oil to construction, steel, IT, finance, and medicine.
And there are certainly a lot of expectations riding on this trip. I mean, even the president herself promised to return with real results. So what kind of business effect are we expecting from her visit?
Well, Iran has said it stands ready to pour hundreds of billions of dollars in projects in the coming years to update the state's aging infrastructure. So one of the most promising sectors certainly is construction. Take a look. The Middle East has been a hotbed of activity for Korean builders since they turned their eyes overseas in the 1960s. But as they've been struggling amid the global economic slowdown, with overseas construction orders dropping by a third in the first quarter, Iran has emerged as the rare jewel in the sand. The chairman of Hanjin Group and POSCO will be among President Park Geun-hye's 236-strong delegation to the Middle East's second largest economy this weekend. As deals are already in the pipeline, business agreements worth some $20 billion are expected to be signed. Terim Industrial, already a household name in Iran, is in talks to lay train tracks and build a dam and hydroelectric plant, projects worth a combined $6.77 billion. Provisional contracts are set to be drafted in May. Hyundai Engineering Company is set to sign a MOU to develop a 12-phase gas refinery in the South Pars field, the largest natural gas reserve in the world, as the company surveys another project to build a 500-megawatt powerhouse. Another deal to be inked involves a new 1,000-bed hospital for Iran's top medical school to be built by Hyundai E&C and equipped by POSCO Daewoo. As they turn the corner to brighter days, Korea's builders are wasting no time to upgrade their partnership with Iran to levels beyond what they were before the 2010 UN sanctions.
Well, Iran certainly is a rare opportunity in this protracted era of slow growth. Now, are there any other sectors that are hoping to launch into a new phase of growth?
Well, we have talked at length about the struggling shipbuilding industry this week, and Korea's big three shipbuilders are most certainly looking to nab contracts with the oil-rich country as Iran rejoins the world's crude oil exporters. They will need carriers to deliver their goods and also to store it, so industry data is showing that about $80.7 billion worth of projects could come from related industries this year. Meanwhile, on the refinery end, SK Group, represented by its chairman Choi Tae-won this weekend, will look to expand its crude oil imports from Iran, which had dropped to 5% of its imports in recent years from the pre-sanctions level of 10 to 15%. This has been Eunice Kim with your look at Korean industries and Iran.
So with expectations high ahead of President Park Geun-hye's visit, we'll get a closer look at Iran and what its economy has to offer. Joining us is Chang Ji-hang, Director of the Middle East and North Africa Center at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome to the program.
Good to be here. Thank
All
you.
right, so back in January, economic sanctions on Iran were lifted after 37 years. So can you tell us more about the extent of sanctions imposed Iran up until then?
Right. I mean, since 1979 Iranian Revolution, when those radical Iranian students took over U.S. embassy in Tehran and held U.S. diplomats as hostages, the U.S. government, not surprisingly, cut all the ties with Iran, and they started the sanction against Iran. And since 2003. The IAEA reported and discovered very suspicious nuclear activity from Iran, and the UN sanctions just started since then. Basically, Iran cannot sell their precious revenue oil to the outside, and outsiders, I mean, other countries are not allowed to invest their capital into Iran.
And now that sanctions are lifted, there are a lot of expectations over the opening of this Iranian market, considering that it's a very resource-rich nation. It is the second largest economy in the Middle East. But then many of us know that the flare-up between Iran and Saudi Arabia has been causing a lot of problems now. Can you tell us more about what the situation is like right now between the two countries?
Okay, not that good. But I don't think the current friction and conflict between those two big countries will be escalated as a military conflict because, I mean, those hardliners who are facilitating this friction these days will not get anything when and if the situation is getting worse. So I think we will see more economic frictions and competition over, say, the OPEC negotiation process in a relatively midterm range, but not really, severe military friction, though.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because on top of that, the struggles between the two countries have led the oil-producing countries to fail in reaching a deal to freeze output just a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And now this has led to a negative outlook on the Middle Eastern market as a whole. So what's your opinion on this?
we need to look at more long-term calculation, meaning that those oil-rich Middle Eastern countries and Korea will need to prepare for post-oil era anyway. So they will need to diversify their economy and need to facilitate their manufacturing sector, and we will be a good partner for that. And at the same time, we need to transform our traditional, expertise into more high technology-driven, economy, or say like renewable energy sectors.
Let's shift our focus to Korea and Iran relations as a whole, because I know Korea also took part in imposing sanctions on Iran. So what kind of path has the two countries walked down upon since, I don't know when, they established their economic relations?
Well, thankfully, right now, the current government is from moderate and reformist faction.
All right.
And in the recent two big elections, those reformist faction won a sweeping victory. So that's good news for us. But that doesn't mean that there's no, opposition against Korea, meaning that there's hardliners who wants to hold a closer relationship with North Korea. And many experts in the international community presume that there's strong, nuclear connections between those, hardliner military wing and Kim Jong-un regime. So those two actors still think that, the U.S. government is a big imperialist, evil empire, and South Korea government is a little puppet of it.
How are Korean businesses faring in Iran then? I mean, what kind of presence do they have in the country right now?
Okay, before year 2011, when the sanctions went tougher and harsher, there were 2,000 some Korean small and medium-sized companies. I mean, that's a lot. Thanks to unique feature of Iranian economy, our small and medium-sized companies were able to export and sell little, components or little, mechanical, electronic parts to those Iranian manufacturers. So we had very active medium-sized companies till year 2011. But after that, when the sanctions went tougher, they were supposed to leave. So right now we have only about 10 big companies who were working hard to re-engage with the Iranian economy.
What kind of changes has Iran seen since those sanctions were removed?
The biggest change, in my mind, is the rise of moderate and reformist faction.
Like you said before.
Yes, yes. Like we had two big important elections, including parliamentary and the Assembly of Experts in late February. And not surprisingly, those reformists got really huge victory, especially in big cities, including Tehran. So right now, the mood is really favorable toward, reformists and the supporters of reformists who are from, the middle class and young generation and women are really welcoming those, foreign countries who wanted to invest more in Iran.
Going back to what we heard about earlier, now there are big expectations over President Park Geun-hye's visit to Iran. So what should Korea do in order to, I guess, increase more opportunities in the region to better enter the Iranian market and also to, I guess, establish stronger economic ties with Tehran?
Well, there's no Iran-specific answer to that question. As usual, we need to focus more on, the quality of work and reciprocity and localization. And we should not forget that China was kind of like a failure to do so. I mean, Chinese government was not really participating the sanctions regime. So the China is the only actor who benefits the cheap Iranian oil during the sanctions regime, but apparently they failed to provide more, localization, or they didn't really care much about the locals' benefit. So we should not follow that path at all.
So learn from their mistakes so we succeed. All right. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Korea's tourism sector is gearing up for May, with major holidays in neighboring countries overlapping in the early weeks. And Chinese tourists are expected to make up a big chunk of those traveling to Korea during the upcoming holiday season. Our Lee Joo-young tells us more.
It's not every day that you receive a warm welcome just for visiting another country. This was the scene on May 1st at Incheon International Airport last year, when hundreds of thousands of Chinese tourists came to Korea for their long Labor Day holiday, which usually extends into the 8th of May. According to Korea Tourism Organization, the number of Chinese tourists last year rose by roughly 20% on year during the Labor Day holiday, while the increase in the total number of tourists stopped at 7.6%. And for this holiday season, the tourism agency expects travelers from mainland China to increase by another 10% to roughly 63,000 people. The country has already seen a general incline in Chinese tourists, with March visitors having jumped 18% from the year before.
We get about 3 days off during the Labor Day holiday. Many prefer to come to Korea because it's easy to get a visa and the airfare is cheap.
Major retailers are expecting to enjoy a surge in sales from Chinese shoppers. Lotte department store said it's offering discounts of up to 20% on over 250 brands, while Hyundai said free delivery all the way back home will be an option for those who purchase over $8,000 by May 8th. The Seoul metropolitan government is also working to provide a better experience by operating 6 temporary visitor information centers at popular tourist areas in the city equipped with Wi-Fi and tablet computers. The government will also beef up monitoring on unfair practices such as price gouging. On top of individual tourists, a combined 8,000 Chinese healthcare workers are expected to come on 2 separate group tours during the holiday period, which is predicted to create an economic effect of over $43 million. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching and have a great weekend.